Welcome to Life Bursts. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Matt, and we're about to journey through 90 years in 50 minutes. Don't go away.
Yes, welcome to Life Bursts with Matt and Sarah. And today we are chatting with John. Thank you, John, for coming in and sharing your story with us.
That's a pleasure.
It is a pleasure to have you.
It is a pleasure to come, yes.
Yeah, really good. We're really looking forward to hearing. You've got lots of stories to tell. We might not get them
in how long?
Today.
50 minutes.
50 minutes. So take us back, John. Tell us where life began for you.
Well, a real noticeable one was during the war, when the war started, World War II.
Yeah.
And where were you? Where were you born?
We were in England then.
Right.
We lived in England and with my parents. My dad was a policeman. And in the Warwickshire Constabulary.
Right.
Yeah, big one.
Yes, I think that was a significant one because it's one of those things that sticks in your mind. You never forget.
So you were alive when the war hit England. And so tell us your memories of that time.
Well, one of the things we used to used to travel down into the shelter every night, mainly every night, because that's when the bombers came over. And if it was a clear night, no cloud, you'd know they'd be there. If it was a cloudy night, no moon, and dark, they wouldn't come. So that's what we used to pray for, was a dark night, probably rain. But if it was a clear night, you had to go down the shelter because that's where the action was up the top there, and you were down there.
So you were how old were you in those years?
It was about 6.
Right, so 5 or 6 as the war came through.
Yeah.
Now we do have a photo of you back in those. This is incredible, really, knowing that it's going back so far. This is John, age 3 or 4. So before those.
Can you see the likeness?
What an incredible picture. There we go. Hold that up. To have a photo from back then, it's been coloured, obviously, but this is you with a toy from back in those very early years in England.
Later on in life, you can see that I used to know like cars and things like that because the little truck down there, look, there's one of those tin trucks that you used to be able to buy there. There would be collectibles now, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Yes, they would. What a special photo to have, especially being black and white and then it's being coloured.
And it's so good too, isn't it?
It is very good.
You haven't changed a bit. So tell me about those moments in the war. I mean, I guess there was, you were young, but was there a sense of fear for everyone in the community, or because you were so young, it was just an adventure?
Yes, you used to live down in the air raid shelter.
Right.
By the way, I don't know whether any of the viewers know what an Anderson shelter was, but the shelter was made out of corrugated iron, like any sheds today, but it was more substantial than that. And the iron went up like that, and then it curved at the top, and the other one went to it, and that was curved, and they bolted together, and that made your shelter underneath. And according to how large your family was, that's the size that you got. Ours was quite a large family because there was 4 of us in it, so we were lucky we got an extra sheet of iron.
Right.
But for anybody that was just a couple, there'd only be 2, to make the shelter like that.
Right.
And you can either dig them in the ground if you want to, dig the hole and put them in the ground, or you can have them on the top. And like Dad, he opted for half and half. So what he dug the hole out, partly in, the dirt that came out went onto the top of the shelter, and they put flowers on the top of it to make it look like a garden.
Wow.
From the air,
Yeah. So this is in your backyard. Yeah. And so every time there was a raid, the sirens went into there. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was one particular raid, one moment that particularly stands in your memory. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, my dad hadn't an office. He hadn't got an office. He was just an ordinary old constable, And he used to do typing. I don't know what what a typewriter is. If you use a typewriter, it's like the one that came before the computer.
Yes.
But the keys were similar, same. And he had to do his office work in the lounge. So every night he wanted to do a report, he had to take the typewriter into the lounge and type away, But anyway, after he'd done all that, he hadn't got the office, as I said, so he used to keep this typewriter in the hallway on a table.
Mm-hmm.
And for some unknown reason, Mum used to place her best hat every time she wore it on top of the typewriter, which stands on the hall stand, see?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the bombs came one night. One was very, very close. And as you know, with a bomb, when it explodes, it blows everything out. And the void that it leaves, it has to come back in again. The air, it blows the air away, but it's got to come somewhere, so it comes back in again.
Wow.
And this particular night, the bomb went off, one of them did, and unbeknownst to us, it took the typewriter and the hall stand and Mum's best hat out into the street. Through two doors, which are in the alleyway.
Mm-hmm.
And the next morning, we couldn't find Dad's typewriter, we couldn't find the hall stand, couldn't find Mum's hat. So we walked up and down, and there it was in the middle of the street, still as it was in the hallway.
Wow.
On the hall stand with the hat on it.
Wow.
So that was a funny thing, that was.
Yeah,
Where's my hat, she used to say.
Back out on the street.
Oh, it's out in the street.
Just from the shockwave or wow. Yeah. So you, what an incredible time to have lived through. Your formational years as a youngster.
There was some funny things happen, but
I'm sure
a lot that weren't funny, of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
Could you hear the planes and things going over at night time?
Yeah. There were 4-engine planes. I think they were a Heinkel or something like that they call it. I've forgotten that now anyway. But anyway, they used to come over in waves, like squadrons, I suppose they would have been if we'd have looked up to see them. And you can hear the humming of the engines and like that, synchronised,
Mm-hmm.
And then when they were turning to come into the bombing run, the engine, one side would rev up, as they came in and dived in. And then you hear the whistle from the bombs, and then the explosion.
Mm.
But a lot of the bombs weren't high explosive bombs; they were incendiary bombs for causing fire.
Okay.
And that's what Coventry got.
Right.
There's a lot of it. Well, it had both, but a lot of them were incendiary bombs, and they did an awful lot of damage, like they did to the cathedral.
Right.
Yeah.
So you were in Coventry. Where
we lived in Nuneaton, which is a little town close to Coventry.
Right.
But we caught the back end of all the bombs.
Right. Okay. And where is Coventry in relation to London? Around for those who don't know the area.
It'd be about 90 miles, I suppose.
Yeah.
Because in Coventry, as you probably know, there's lots of little towns and villages scattered all over the place. They're not all big cities and 100 miles away like there is here. Yeah. So,
wow.
You got some photos as well to share for those who are watching on YouTube or on television.
Did you get any?
So we've got a photo of you, your two brothers. This will be a few years later. So tell us about, you had some siblings. Your brother was one of them. Tell us about your family.
Well, I'll say Dad was in the police force. Mum was home duties, as you call it. Yeah. I used to work, I started work on the farm, and that was hard work because it was early morning milking, and we didn't have milking machine in those days. You were the old hand thing.
Doing hand gestures right now.
Hand actions.
Yes,
milking the cow.
Yeah. And that's how we got the milk. It went into the cooler, of course, in the dairy on the farm to cool it off, and then they went into a big churn, and then the trucks came and picked them up in the morning.
So you were no stranger to hard work as a youngster.
No.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, we will come back with more Life Bursts with Matt and Sarah, chatting with John straight after this. Welcome back to Life Bursts with Matt and Sarah. Today we're chatting with John, and we've got so many more stories to get through in the remainder of the show. But we did leave everybody on a picture of your siblings, and we forgot to mention your sisters. Tell us about your sisters.
Yeah, I've got 2 sisters, or did have.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Christine and Betty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's surprising how the years go by. You know, you tend to part, and they all live in England, or did. And my Betty, the one I married, and we all came out here, and that was where the division was. You know, but we still used to contact each other. You know, it's good that way, but it's not like personal touching, is it? You know.
It's different.
Yeah,
yes.
It's different.
Yes,
yeah.
That's right. Okay, well, since we're now talking about Betty, tell us how you met Betty, your late wife.
Oh, well, we used to go to the village hall dances, you know.
Yeah.
And you've probably heard about the dances in England in the village halls, and they're quite, or used to be quite popular. I think they still are. And I used to look at this one, you know, I thought, cool, she's nice, she is.
Right, yes.
You can say this now because she's in heaven with Jesus, but yes, okay.
All wound up, you know.
Right, yes.
Was she wearing a really beautiful dress?
Yeah, we used to go square dancing quite a lot.
Okay.
As well as ballroom dancing, but and the sweat used to pour off us, you know, on a warm summer's night,
right,
when you're doing this square dancing. But it was fun.
Yes,
it was good fun.
Okay. So you looked at Betty and you. Yeah. What happened from there? How did you go over and talk to her on the first time, or did you watch her for a bit, or?
And then it happened.
Okay.
Oh, you got the story right.
Yeah, she was good. Yeah, she was.
Okay. Well, we'll come back to Betty.
But
the along the way, you weren't milking cows for forever. What did you do after that?
I started work outside of the farm in the car factory, like a lot of blokes did, you know, because Coventry was the home of the motor car before the war, and they changed the munitions during the war, obviously, and then of course after the war they all got back to cars again.
Yeah.
So I got into the car factory at the Humber car factory. And the Humber is a limousine car, I suppose you'd call it. And you probably heard of the Hillman and the Sunbeam and all those. They're all English cars from that one factory. So I decided when we came over to Australia that I was going to have a Humber.
Okay.
So I did.
So how did that happen? How did you end up in Australia? What's that story?
Well, my friend that I was working with in the Humber factory, he came in one Monday morning and he said, "Well, John, I'm off to Australia." I said, "Oh, you? When you going?" He says, "Well, we've got all the paperwork done and we're only waiting for the date." So I said, "Oh, that sounded good." So he said, "Well, when I get to Australia, I'll still write to you." So he did that. And when they got to Australia, they got a house in Holden Hill. Mm-hmm. You know where Holden Hill is. And it's all built up now. But
in
at
Adelaide,
that time, they were just building, you know. Same with Elizabeth was all being built. And he wrote to me and I thought, oh, this sounds all right, you know. So I thought, I think we'll do the same. So we did. And we did all the paperwork like he did, and everything went through. We had our medicals and all the rest of it. And then on the day that we landed in Australia, they were there waiting for us.
Oh, wonderful. So by plane or by ship? Or how?
No, we went by boat.
I think we've got a photo of the particular ship that you took as...
Our son was 16 months old then. And Betty was so scared of letting him loose on the deck, you know, but the deck was all netted in, so he couldn't fall over the side. But she still was always on edge, you know, when he was let loose.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Wow. So, well, let's keep with those years. You've come across with Betty and the family, so we've missed a step in between.
Yes.
that
was my bad. I just got
at some
excited.
point you got married to
we did.
to your
That's
dear
right,
wife,
we did.
Betty. You did, yes.
Yes, we did.
So we do have a photo of your wedding as well, which
Yes.
and your bridal party. This was back in England before you
Yes.
came,
Yes.
and a beautiful day.
It was a good day.
Yes.
Yeah. We got married in Woolvey Church, village of Woolvey. Because Betty came from there, and a lot of the people on the wedding photo came from there also. And we used to go to dances there too, in Woolvey Hall. So yes, that was what a memorable day, that one.
And this looks like it was
we had
after
our honeymoon in London, in a hotel room in London, and when we got there, there was a single bed. So they quickly ushered us round to the lounge to have a drink, while they changed the bed.
Yeah, okay.
All these funny things that stick in your mind. It's strange, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is.
And where did you settle down after you got married?
We settled down we had a flat in Parkholme for a start. And I said to Bet, I think we'll have to move somewhere. So somebody was doing a tea, I think it was, up in Ichunga, and we were invited up there, and that's how we fell in love with Ichunga.
So once you were in Australia. What about after you were married back in England? Where did you settle?
Oh, we settled in. Well, we weren't there all that long.
Yeah, okay. So it was fairly soon.
Yeah.
And during the war, what did you do?
What did I do?
Yes. So we've jumped another step. So
I know.
We'll go back in time and we'll have a bit of time to focus on this.
Right.
But after the war finished, you were enlisted. You went into some form of service.
Yeah.
How did that come about? Because you were working at the time.
Yeah, I was working, and my brother Frank, he was of service age, which 18 I think it was. He got called up to the army, and I thought, cool. When I thought about it, he's going to get all over the place in the army. I thought, I might do that, so I volunteered.
Okay.
And Frank and I went through all our army career together.
Right.
Yeah. He got called up and he was sent to abroad. Of course, I went with him. It was great.
And we've got these fantastic photos
To Egypt.
Yes, of you and your brother lined up before you went off, standing in front of this beautiful car, which was
the Rover.
Right, yeah. And then you both went across to Egypt. You were stationed there for a bit of time.
Yeah. We went by plane, and we they took us in a coach, of course, all together in a Stansted Airport. It was near London, Stansted. And it was an army plane, one that's been commandeered for the army, I suppose. Mm-hmm. It was an Avro York, which was the one that came after the Lancaster bomber. So it looked a bit like the Lancaster bomber, only the Lancaster bomber's got two tails, two rudders, but this one had three. There's one in the centre for some reason, stability, I suppose. But anyway, we sat there at Stansted Airport, in the plane, and it was Scottish Airlines, and she came out. We had an air hostess too, and she came around just before takeoff with a tray. And I thought, gee, we're going to get drinks, but we didn't. They were wads of cotton wool.
Yeah.
Now you see this tissue that I've got rolled up here. It was similar to that. We had two of these each.
Yeah.
And we had to stuff them in our ears. Like that,
yeah,
and the lolly was to suck when for your takeoff, so you're swallowing
for your ears
to make them pop. So we all sat there, and the engines were starting up, and I looked up the aisle like this, and it was funny. You could see all these grown fellas with all these wads of cotton wool sticking out of their ears.
Yeah, wow. So
but we went off, and night came, and we landed in Malta, No, I'd never flown before. I don't think I had at the time. I'd never flown before.
Mm-hmm.
And as we were flying, we were up fairly high, nothing like they are today. But looking down at the Mediterranean, there was Malta, a little dot on the water, you know. And I thought, well, how are we going to land in that?
Right.
Yeah.
But of course, as it got nearer, it got bigger. But yeah, so we did land in that. We had a meal, and they refueled the plane. Of course, I suppose that's what the stop was for. And then off we went again. And the next morning, we landed in Fayed in Egypt.
Okay. Well, that's a great place to pause because you had some interesting experiences in Egypt. So
Yeah,
we'll hear more about those. We're chatting to John with Life Burst with Matt and Sarah. Thanks for joining us on Life Burst with Sarah and Matt. We're chatting to John. And John, you've taken us through explosions during the war. You were working at a dairy and then building cars. And then you're enlisted for service and you've just taken a flight and landed in Egypt. So we've got some beautiful photos of that time as well that we showed earlier. Yeah. How did you find it hitting the ground in that?
Well, one of the things that stuck in my mind, you don't realise the smell,
right?
Because Egypt's hot, as you know, and the cabin door opened, and of course the hot air wafted in, along with it the smell as well. That's one of the things that did hit me, was that I didn't realise it was going to be like it was.
So hot.
Yeah, and so smelly.
Right. Yeah. And as you can see from the photos, you weren't put up in luxury 5-star accommodation. We
were in big tents.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one day we had a big storm. Now, you think of Egypt as being hot and dry, which it is normally. But one particular day we had this storm. I don't know where it came from, but it did it. The heavens just opened and down it came, and in no time at all, we were up to our knees in water. See, and that was our signal stores. I was in the signal section of the army. Mm-hmm. It was in like an indent in the sand, big hollow, and of course it all filled up with water, didn't it? Mm-hmm. And our signal stores was part of that. Of course, all the signals, radio sets and everything were in the water. So we had to quickly form a chain of blokes to try and take everything out before it got really sodden, you know.
Yeah.
So your training and your time over there was redirected into emergency relief.
It came in handy, you know, and all the training, all the running around you had to do.
Wow. So that was an eventful time.
It was.
And what did you do as a part of the training and your time over there when it wasn't flooded?
Well, just outside of Fayed it is, Fayed. It's not all that far from Cairo. It's quite close to the Suez Canal. And alongside of our army barracks, there was a huge sand dune. It must have been really solid sand, you know, because it did blow when the wind blew, but it didn't blow it all the way, I tell you. Mm-hmm. Anyway, they used to give us the job of running up and down that training.
Okay. That's hard work.
Was it ever? Yeah. And sometimes you had all your kit on, you know, your backs on your back and everything. And a lot of us got worn out doing that, you know. Right. No, up you go again, you know. Wow. If you'd been a naughty boy.
Yeah.
Right.
So it wasn't. You got to see some pyramids, but it was hard work being over there.
Yeah. We saw we went in the pyramids. That's unusual, the pyramids, because it is unusual. They're, as you know, they're massive blocks of stone, sandstone, and how on earth in a place like it is, where did they get it all from? There's no quarry there. It's visible anyway. And they've been there for thousands of years, haven't they?
Yes.
The pyramids.
Yes.
So where they came from, goodness knows, but they were bigger than that television set. A lot bigger and square, you know.
Yeah.
And they're so accurately cut. When they built the pyramids, as you know, the edges are straight to make the pyramid. and everyone fits.
Mm.
There's not one that's, oh, that's a bit out, it's about a line, but no, everything fits.
Mm.
And we had a trip to the pyramids, of course. One weekend it was that the sergeant got us a trip to the pyramids, so it was great. And when we got there was this, as they call themselves, was on the standing by the coach. He says, "You give me acres, I climb pyramid." We thought, oh, go on, because they're tall, aren't they? They're big.
The pyramid, yes.
He says, you give me acres, I climb pyramid fast. So we thought, oh, we all gave him some money, in a hat, gave it to him, and he looked at it. Oh, all right, I go.
Okay.
And he went up one edge of the pyramid just like a monkey. Yeah. And when he got to the top, and it didn't take him long, he stood on the very point of the pyramid and waved to us all like this.
Yeah. There you go. Well, one way to make a living.
Yeah. That was amazing.
So some fascinating experience, eye-opening for two young lads there, you and your brother.
Yeah.
You returned from service. You got back into work. You met Betty. Or you already knew Betty, but you got married.
She waited for me.
She waited. Oh, that's nice. And as we've shared, you were therefore you got married, and it was soon after that, with your first child, you decided to come across here to the great Southland,
to the Southland,
to Australia. And then, as you were saying, you had some friends who lived up in the Adelaide Hills, and there was a draw to come up this way.
It was, yeah. We used to come up well, not every Sunday, but we used to come up quite regularly, and they lived up there in Holden Hill. Right. And then, of course, after that, we got settled down and thought we were all settled as a group, They came one day and they said, "Look, John, we've got to go home again." I said, "Well, what's wrong?" He said, "Oh, she can't stand the heat."
Oh, yeah, the Adelaide heat.
Yeah, the Adelaide heat in the summer. Yeah. So they decided they were going to go home again, and they did. On a period of time, they've got to get all the paperwork and everything done.
Yeah.
And one Sunday they said, "Well, we're leaving next week, so we've got to go." So we got to see them off on the plane. They went back by plane, and that was the end of that. So we've been back over and seen them since, but they're both dead now.
Okay. Yes.
So
lots of years in between.
Yeah, lots of years in between. Yeah, it was good fun.
So we do have a picture of you and your late wife Betty here. This is a beautiful picture of lots of memories attached to that one.
That's right. Yeah.
So at that point you were in Australia. Your friends had left, and
the fella in Chunga took that picture. It's good, isn't it?
Right. Yes. So you moved to the Adelaide Hills. You decided to make the move up into the colder climate of the
Yes, I was about to say.
Yeah, and we haven't left them since.
Right.
No, we like it up here. It's nice. Of course, we're not in Chunga now, but we're up at Mount Barker, which is not all that far away. We had to sell the house. Well, we didn't have to sell it, but all the kids flew the nest as they do. And the one that we built was solid brick.
Now we do have a photo of that.
We've got a photo of that.
You didn't
solid.
just. You've got some practical skills behind you. You're building cars and things, but you helped to build this house.
Yeah.
In Chunga.
Built a big blocks.
Yeah. Inspired by the pyramids, perhaps. Not quite that large.
No, that one's a bit out.
Yeah. So you built that. That was your family home based in the hills, and you had a few more children along the way?
We had two. Well, we had three. Yeah. Paul, the boy, and Lauren and Nicola. So, we decided to give it a go, so they're quite happy. One lives in Lenswood. She's a orchardist, do they call them an orchardist? Got an orchard.
That sounds like a good word.
Yeah. She married well, it's not don't sound right, but it is. Yeah. Got an orchard. And Paul, he's truck driving, has been for a long while. and who's the other one?
Tim.
Tim. Yeah, he's just retired actually, but he's got a job. It was strange that he got a job offered to him on the day that he retired, because my Betty was in the nursing home at Harndorf, and the boss of the Harndorf came to Tim one day and said, "Would you like a job?" And Tim hadn't thought about it. He just retired, but he wanted to know what it was, and he said, "Well, I'm not climbing any ladders, and I'm not doing this, and I'm not doing that." And the boss says, who offered him the job, he said, "Well, it's fine. If you don't want to do that, don't do it." He said, "But we're offering you a job as a handyman, you know."
Mm.
So
they got the job.
Yeah, so he took it, and he's had it ever since.
It's great. Well, John, you've got lots of stories to share, and more still to come. We're chatting to John here on Life Bursts.
Welcome back to Life Bursts, here with Sarah and Matt. We're chatting with John today, and I'm going to say this is definitely an episode that if you're listening to this via podcast or radio, that you definitely need to head to our YouTube channel and watch this episode, because there's so many pictures, so many hand movements, so many things that have been happening. It's definitely an episode worth checking out there instead. Just type in Life Bursts with Matt and Sarah. Now, John, we've got some pictures of your cars and hobbies and things that you got up to, but what did you do for work when you came to Australia?
Work? What's that?
I don't know.
No, I started, well, I got a job on a poultry farm in Ichunga.
Okay.
And I was there for 16 years.
Right.
Yeah.
What does one do at a poultry farm? Or do I not want to know?
Yeah.
No, well, it was a breeder's farm.
Okay.
And I was in charge at the time. I was in charge of the food. So I had to do all the mixing of the food, which was in a large shed with big silos. You know, they weighed everything out. Everything was weighed. All the corn and the meat meal and all the rest of it into the food for the chooks. And that was my job, and it was a good job. And I had to go to various silos, like down in Taylor Bend and those places, with a big truck, and fill up with it and bring it to the farm to do the mixing. So that was my job for a while, mixing food and putting it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could imagine you doing that, like being with chickens and stuff. Did you ever get attached to any of them and take them home?
Oh. You know how to make a chook. You can
saying.
You can mesmerise a chicken.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go.
Yeah. No.
Tricks of the trade.
How do you mesmerise a chicken?
If you catch the chook.
Okay.
Like that.
Yeah.
With its wings closed, right?
Yep.
And you put your hand on its head, cover its head up, and go round and round and round like that.
Like a washing machine.
5 or 6 times. Can everybody see it? Round and round and round like that.
Yeah.
And then just stand it there like that and release it, and it'll stay there.
Right.
Yeah.
There you go.
And we used to do it with its head under its wing. Put its head under its wing like that.
Yeah.
Close it up and do the same thing. Round and round and round, 4 or 5 times like that, and it just sits there.
Amazing.
How did you bring it back?
Just knock it over.
Just knock it over.
And get up and walk around like that and wonder what had happened, I suppose.
The things you learn along the way. Well, there you go. That's
part of chook farming.
Yep. Got to learn the tricks of the trade.
Is that what you did when you were bored, was it? Just go pick up a chicken and dice it and then put it back.
No.
Alongside your work, you were able to keep up a number of hobbies, and some of them drew you back to cars.
Yeah,
where you started.
I've always been interested in cars, as everybody probably knows. But there's one that was interesting me, and it was I used to deliver, like I said, chook food to the farms, and I noticed this relic it was, away from the farm building, but it was stuck underneath a blackberry bush or has weeds and that growing through it. And it was a rusty old thing, it didn't look any good at all. And I looked at it and I thought, found my way into the blackberries, and it showed me the radiator of a car which I'd never seen before, and it was a curved shaped radiator, and the radiator itself was like a honeycomb V shape, not a flat radiator, it was V shaped like that. And I thought, well, that looks interesting. So then I lifted the bonnet up, and there wasn't much left of it actually. It was all rusty, but the framework of the car was timber, wood, and what's left of the metalwork that was on it was all rotten anyway. So I thought, I looked under the bonnet and it said Henry Meadows of Wolverhampton on the engine plate. Now Meadows, not Meadows in Ichunga, in here, South Australia, Meadows was a firm that made engines for cars back in England in the way, and they also made stationary engines for farm use, well, for grain elevators and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So I said to the farmer, is that any good? Do you want to sell it? Oh, no, it's a cheap rubbish. Wouldn't sell you that. So I left it at that for a while, and I went back to it for some time later and said, look, sell it to me. How much do you want for it? Oh, give me $50, he said. $50. So that's what I did. $50 I gave him.
Right.
And I got a trailer. And the wheels wouldn't even go round. They were solid.
Right.
Right.
So you're probably helping him out by giving him getting rid of it.
And he said, well, if with that $50, he says you've got to clean all the rubbish around it. Like there's a bit of metal over there, and another piece over here, and an old wheel somewhere else. So he said, you clear the site of all the bits and pieces. He says you can have it for $50. So that's what I did.
Yeah.
And I took it back to Ichunga, where I'm going to blow my nose if you excuse me.
Very well.
Took it back to Ichunga, and I left it at the side of the house. This is on Mariana Street, where we lived, and all for a while it just sat there, and I thought, I must do something with this. So I started on it, and each piece of rotten wood I took away from what was left of the frame and labelled it and put it out so it didn't get damaged anymore.
Yeah.
And that was the framework of the body, or what was left of it. The actual panel work was rotten anyway. When you touched it, it just crumbled up. The wheels had been sunk in the ground. They were wooden spoke wheels, by the way. They were sunk in the ground that much that the bottom, when we shifted it, the bottom was rotten of the wheels. So I thought, gee, I've got myself a problem here. Anyway, the engine itself was seized up, but it was all complete. And the chassis got surface rust on it, but it wasn't rotten, There's bits of old rotten leather that was what was left of the seats, and the seats were all sprung with springs.
Yeah.
And they were all rotten. You squashed them up like that, and they just broke.
Oh.
The wire of the.
Now we just showed a picture for those who are watching, which is not the same car. It's another car project you work on, but I have seen photos of this. When you say there was not a lot left, there really was. It was
rotten.
To someone like me, I would think it's a completely.
Well, everybody that saw it as it was, they said, "You're mad doing this."
Yeah.
I thought, well, I've never seen a Meadows engine before.
Yeah.
And probably a lot of people haven't.
Yeah.
So that's where I took it on.
So you put a lot of hours, a lot of love, a lot of probably some expense into this project.
10 years.
10 years of project alongside working and other things.
Yeah.
And when we come back, I think we'll, for our viewers, be able to see a photo of the completed product, which is beautiful. So don't go away. This is Life Burst with Matt and Sarah.
Welcome back to Life Burst, here with Matt and Sarah, and we're on our home stretch of our 90 years here in 50 minutes on Life Burst, chatting with John. Now, I'm excited to see the final product of this car that you spent like 10 years working on and bringing back to life. Yes. Let's see it. You can catch this on our YouTube channel if you're listening to this via podcast or radio as well. So you can just head to Life Bursts with Matt and Sarah. Let's see the picture of the car.
Look at that.
There
Beautiful.
we go.
Now this is a real classic car. What's
It's a chick.
A chick.
A chick.
People say a chick. Never heard of one, and it's true. But a lot of people haven't. But it was originally made in England by a fellow named of Clarence Chick, and he was in the army in the early First World War, and they were injured badly apparently during the war. And when he was recouping, him and his mate decided that when they got back to England, they were going to build a car.
Right.
Because it was in the early days of cars, everybody got push bikes then, you know. So that's what they decided. And they sussed out all the places, the components they could get. And they ordered 50, I think it was, altogether. 50 engines, 50 whatever. And they got back to England and started up this firm. And they built, I think there was 50, I don't know whether they completed 50 or not, but they built a few anyway. And they were quite big cars, as you can see. Limousine almost, you know. But this was the one that I found.
Yeah.
So as it is now, it's beautiful, but as it was absolutely rotten. You've seen it.
You showed me some photos of it really was well, ready for the junkyard, I would have said.
Yeah.
But
well, we found it in a blackberry bush.
Yeah, so
in Macclesfield. And I thought, well, when did it? I don't even know how it got there. But it did.
A great find. And for those who can't see, it's painted beautifully red, restored, and it just looks as good as new. It's like something that would have been worth a little bit more as you sold it than $50. Hard to part with.
Well, if anybody wants to see it now, when you go over to Wollongong.
Yeah.
It's in the Life Museum over there.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
Well done.
So if any of you get on your travels, go over to Wollongong, go into the Motor Life Museum, and it's there.
Right, lovingly restored.
Yeah.
Now, this wasn't the only vehicle you worked on. We've shown another picture as well. You and your friend Bob working on. You created a convertible.
Yeah. Well, Bob Sexton and Joan, they're friends of ours, of mine now. He's got a Morris 1000, or did have. He sold it now, but it's Morris 1000 anyway. And it's a factory built convertible, factory made convertible.
Okay.
And this one that I've made, it's not a factory built one, but I made it as near to the factory as I could. But it wasn't the Morris 1000. The Morris 1000 has got the headlights up in the top of the guards, built into the mud guards at the top. This one has got the headlights down in the grille, the radiator grille. So that's the difference. They've still got V windscreens, V-shaped windscreens. And other than that, they're much the same. But I decided I was going to make it like Bob's. So I got the tape measure out and took a lot of measurements. The secret is you measure twice and cut once, like we always say. So I looked at it and took photographs of it, and I could see now that there's metal got to go over the top of the windscreen. It's not just a windscreen sitting up and that makes it into the convertible. No, it's got to have something solid to pull the hood down onto. Yeah. So I measured up the windscreen, and there's about that much metal above the windscreen, curved metal, before the roof starts. And I measured that and marked it out with a texter and measured again. And then one day I said to Bob, well, we're going to cut the roof off today. Oh, Bob says, so I've got the angle grinder, and you can't, if you make a mistake, that's the end of it. No. Well, there's a lot of welding to do. Yeah. But anyway, so I decided this is going to be it. So I gradually went along the line of the roof, straight across the top. That let it free from the windscreen. They had to cut the door pillars off to release it from the rest of the body.
Yeah.
And Bob was on one side and I was on the other. And I said, right, Bob, I'll just grind the last bit off to release it. That's what we did. And of course, it wanted to fall then, didn't it? And so we had to catch it.
Yes.
And it stood there. He was one side and I was the other. And we got it balanced in our hands. And what do we do with it now?
Now where?
So we walked to the back of the car before we could get it away from the car. We couldn't lift it. I couldn't have it on my side because he was on that side. So move it along.
Another labour of love.
Yeah.
So you had some good years in that vehicle.
It was great. It worked well.
Yeah.
And there's an upholsterer friend of ours. He lives in Macclesfield, and he did all the upholstery on the Chick and the other one. Mm. So it all worked out well.
Yeah, and of course you've got some great friends that you've built along the way as you've gone through these years that you've worked with as well. We've got another photo of your some of those friends and your brother who came and visited.
Yeah, he came. Frank and his wife came over from England when I said they were going on the Beta Birdwood run with the Chick.
Ah, yeah,
and the first run it's ever done. So. They spent a lot of money and came over. Yeah. And it was great because we had to dress up in the era costume, you know.
Wonderful.
It wasn't just in overalls and all that sort of thing. So we tried and I think Bet had to get buy a hat out of a second-hand shop somewhere, and you know how you do. And the picture of them, I think it's a picture of them where they sat just before the Beta Birdwood run started.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So you were able to really enjoy that vehicle before you got rid of it in some real.
Everybody, when we were on the run, you know, blowing the horns.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
That's fantastic. And you've shared so many pieces of advice along the way, John. But is there one piece that you would share in the last minute of our show?
I think looking at the Chick, I think a lot of people seeing it as it was would give up, but never give up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Took me 10 years.
Yes.
But you didn't give up, John.
But it was worth it.
Yeah.
It was worth it. So my advice is, never, you know, you try something and you think you want to like to do it and you can't, never give up.
Fantastic. Well, John, thank you so much for sharing. That's great advice. And there's
really
lots of elements of your life.
Enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'm glad. There's 90 years there to share, and there's lots of stories you haven't told. But I love the example you've been and the things you've shared through there. So thank you. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks
for
having
John.
Me. Thank you. This has been Life Burst. You can catch up with us wherever you get your podcasts from, as well as on YouTube and Facebook, community television and radio. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Matt. Thanks for joining us today.
Life Bursts is hosted by Matthew Karat and Sarah Freeman, with production by Reese Jarrett and Kay Hoshraw Ozadigan. For more episodes of Life Bursts, go to rawcut.com.au. This is a RawCut production.